My boss promoted his mistress over me. After 10 years, his wife was on the board. My boss gave my deserved promotion to his 22-year-old mistress. She's more flexible, he said. His wife was on the board of directors. I told her everything. She's more flexible than you, Julia. In every way that matters. Those were the exact words my boss Marcus Henderson said to me on that crisp Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m., with that smug smile plastered across his face. I'm Julia Martin, 45 years old, senior financial analyst at Brookstone Financial Services in downtown Chicago. I had just asked him about the regional director promotion that had been promised to me for over 8 months, the same position that had mysteriously gone to Bella Chen, a 22-year-old intern who had joined the company just 6 months ago. Simply nodded and said, I understand, Mr. Henderson. Thank you for clarifying. But something cold and calculating had awakened inside me at that moment. After 10 years of 60-hour weeks, of building the client portfolio from $12.3 million to $47.8 million of mentoring junior staff and covering for Marcus's mistakes, I finally understood what kind of game we were really playing. What Marcus didn't know was that his wife, Patricia Henderson, wasn't just some socialite housewife. She was the Patricia Henderson who sat on our board of directors, holding a 23% stake in the company through her family trust, and I was about to become very, very patient. Let me take you back to how this all began. It was January 2014 when I first walked into Brookstone Financial Services, fresh from my MBA at Northwestern and eager to prove myself in the corporate world. Marcus Henderson was different then, or at least he hid his true nature better. He was the kind of boss who remembered your birthday, who asked about your weekend plans, who seemed genuinely invested in your career growth. Julia, you've got the sharpest analytical mind I've seen in years, he told me during my first performance review. Stick with me, and I'll make sure you reach the top of this industry. For 9 years, I believed him. I worked through holidays, while Marcus took month-long vacations in Europe. I prepared presentations that he delivered to the board, taking none of the credit. I built relationships with our highest value clients, who specifically requested to work with me rather than other team members. When the Henderson family hosted their annual Christmas party, I was always invited. Patricia would personally seek me out to thank me for my dedication to the company. Marcus speaks so highly of you, Julia, Patricia would say, her genuine warmth a stark contrast to her husband's increasingly artificial charm. He says you're the backbone of his department. The warning signs started appearing about 18 months ago. Marcus began hiring younger female employees, despite our department being perfectly staffed. First, it was expanding our demographic reach. Then it was bringing fresh perspectives to the team. But I noticed how his office door stayed closed, longer during his meetings with these new hires. How he started taking lunch meetings that lasted 3 hours. How he suddenly became very interested in mentoring, but only the attractive women under 30. Everything changed when Bella Chen arrived in September 2023. Bella was undeniably beautiful, the kind of polished, Instagram-perfect beauty that turned heads in every room. Fresh out of college with a degree in communications, she had zero financial experience, but somehow landed a position as strategic marketing intern in our department. The job description was vague, her responsibilities even vaguer. Within her first week, I watched Marcus's behavior shift. Suddenly, he was staying late every night, offering to review Bella's progress personally. He started dressing better, bought himself a new luxury watch, and began making comments about keeping up with the younger generation's innovative approaches. Julia, I need you to show Bella the ropes, he told me that first Friday, his hand lingering just a moment too long on Bella's shoulder. Though I have a feeling she'll be teaching us old-timers a few things soon. I did as I was asked. I trained Bella on our client management systems, explained our reporting procedures, and shared the institutional knowledge I'd accumulated over a decade. She was pleasant enough, not particularly bright when it came to financial analysis, but eager to learn. What struck me most was how quickly she understood the office dynamics. Marcus seems really invested in my success, she mentioned casually one afternoon while I was explaining quarterly projections. He says I have executive potential. That's when I started paying closer attention. Marcus began including Bella in client meetings where her presence made no logical sense. He'd introduce her as one of our rising stars and let her present materials I had prepared. When our biggest client, Jonathan Hayes of Hayes Manufacturing, specifically requested my analysis on a $3.2 million investment strategy, Marcus brought Bella along to observe and learn. But the real revelation came during our December 2023 holiday party. The annual Brookstone Christmas celebration was held at the Palmer House Hotel, a lavish affair that Patricia Henderson personally organized each year. I was standing near the bar, discussing market trends with Patricia and two other board members, when I noticed Marcus and Bella had disappeared from the main ballroom. "Excuse me for just a moment," I said, heading toward the restrooms. But as I walked down the corridor, I heard familiar voices coming from a small conference room that should have been empty. "Can't keep doing this here, Marcus. People will notice." Bella's voice was hushed but clear. "Let them notice," Marcus replied, his voice thick with alcohol and arrogance. "I'm the department head. Besides, you won't have to worry about office gossip much longer. That regional director position is opening up next quarter, and I think you'd be perfect for it." "But what about Julia? Everyone says she's the obvious choice." Marcus laughed, a sound I'd never heard from him before, cruel and dismissive. "Julia's been useful, I'll give her that. But she's stuck in the past, too rigid, too set in her ways. You bring something fresh to the table. You understand how to work with people, how to be accommodating." My blood turned to ice, but I forced myself to remain perfectly still, listening. "The board will ask questions," Bella said, though she didn't sound particularly concerned. "Let me worry about the board. Patricia might hold shares, but she doesn't understand the day-to-day business like I do. I'll present it as bringing innovative leadership to the department. Besides," and here his voice dropped to a whisper I had to strain to hear, "you and I both know you've earned it in ways Julia never could." I walked back to the party, exchanged pleasantries for another hour, and went home. But I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and began making a list. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. I used my senior-level access to begin what I would later call my due diligence project. If Marcus wanted to play games, I was going to understand the rules completely. First, I pulled every expense report Marcus had filed in the past 18 months. What I found was illuminating. Business dinners that lasted until midnight. Hotel charges for client meetings in cities where we had no active clients. Conference fees for events that didn't exist. All told, Marcus had expensed over $23,000 in questionable charges since Bella's arrival, and another $31,000 in suspicious expenses dating back to when his pattern of hiring young women had begun. But the expenses were small potatoes compared to what I discovered next. Using my access to client files, I began cross-referencing Marcus's meeting notes with actual client communications. What I found made my stomach turn. Marcus had been taking credit for investment strategies I had developed, claiming my client relationship building as his own networking success. And most damning of all, he had been inflating his performance metrics by including team achievements as personal accomplishments. The Hayes Manufacturing account, our department's crown jewel, had been entirely my project from inception to execution. Yet Marcus's performance reviews claimed he had, personally, developed and maintained the relationship that brought in $2.3 million in annual fees. I printed nothing, downloaded nothing, but I photographed everything with my personal phone, careful to document dates, times, and file locations. Then I did something that would prove crucial later. I started keeping a detailed daily log of every interaction with Marcus, every assignment given to Bella, every client meeting and outcome. I noted times, witnesses present, and exact quotes whenever possible. January 15th, 2024. Marcus assigns Bella to present my quarterly analysis to Henderson Industries. She mispronounces amortization and confuses gross and net margins. Client specifically requests follow-up meeting with the person who actually prepared this impressive analysis. January 23rd, 2024. Marcus takes Bella to lunch with potential client Davidson Corp. Returns at 4:30 p.m., both slightly intoxicated. Marcus tells team that Bella sealed the deal with her fresh perspective. I later discovered Davidson Corp decided not to move forward after Bella suggested they invest their pension fund in cryptocurrency during the lunch meeting. February 8th, 2024. Overhear Marcus on phone call with Patricia Henderson, claiming that department success is due to his innovative hiring strategies and mentorship of promising young talent. He specifically mentions grooming Bella for significant advancement opportunities. For 3 months, I documented everything while maintaining my perfect performance record. I continued mentoring Bella, who remained oblivious to my growing understanding of the situation. I smiled politely at Marcus's increasingly condescending remarks about my traditional approaches and resistance to change. And then, in March 2024, Marcus made his fatal mistake. The regional director position was officially posted on March 15, 2024. It was a role I had been explicitly promised, carrying a $47,000 salary increase and oversight of 3 Department E branches. The job description read like my resume. Every qualification, every skill requirement, every experience marker matched my background perfectly. I submitted my application through proper channels, along with a comprehensive portfolio, documenting my achievements. My client satisfaction scores were the highest in the company. My team leadership evaluations were exemplary. I had brought in $12.7 million in new business over the past 2 years alone. Bella submitted her application the same day. Her portfolio was thin. She listed innovative communication strategies and fresh market insights as her primary qualifications. Under experience, she had 6 months as a strategic marketing intern and a summer job at Forever 21. The interviews were scheduled for April 10th. Patricia Henderson would be conducting them personally, along with 2 other board members and Marcus himself. But 3 days before the interviews, Marcus called me into his office. "Julia, I need to have a difficult conversation with you," he said, not inviting me to sit down. "I've been evaluating the regional director candidates, and I'm afraid I can't recommend you for the position." I kept my expression neutral. "May I ask why?" "It's nothing personal, but the board is looking for someone who can bring a different energy to the role. Someone more adaptable, more willing to think outside the box." He leaned back in his chair, studying my face for a reaction. "Bella has shown real initiative. She's not bound by old ways of doing things." "I see. And what specific initiatives has Bella demonstrated?" Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "She's brought fresh ideas to client relationships. She understands how to connect with people on a more personal level. She's shown flexibility that, frankly, Julia, you've sometimes lacked." Flexibility. That's right. The ability to go above and beyond, to do whatever it takes to ensure client satisfaction and company success. His smile was cold now, mask completely off. "Some people are willing to be team players in every sense of the word. Others are more rigid in their boundaries." I nodded slowly. "I understand completely, Marcus. Thank you for your honesty." "The interviews are still happening, of course, but I wanted to prepare you. Patricia respects my judgment on departmental matters. I'll be recommending Bella strongly." As I turned to leave, Marcus added, "Oh, and Julia, I'd appreciate it if you helped Bella prepare for her interview. Show her the ropes one more time." That's when I finally smiled. "Of course, Marcus. I'd be happy to help Bella understand exactly what this position requires." That evening, I made a decision that had been building for months. I was going to help Bella prepare for her interview, but probably not in the way Marcus intended. First, I called Patricia Henderson's office directly. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Julia Martin from your husband's department. I was wondering if I might have a brief word with you about the regional director interviews. I have some information that might be valuable for the board's decision-making process." Patricia's assistant scheduled me for a coffee meeting the next morning at 8 a.m., 2 hours before office hours began. I spent that night organizing 3 months of documentation into a comprehensive presentation. Every expense report, every client interaction, every instance of Marcus taking credit for my work, every meeting between him and Bella, every decision that had put company assets and relationships at risk. But I also did something else. I reached out to 3 of our biggest clients, including Jonathan Hayes of Hayes Manufacturing, and asked if they would be willing to provide written testimonials about their experience working with me. All 3 agreed immediately. Julia, you've been the gold standard of professionalism, Jonathan Hayes wrote in his testimonial. In 15 years of working with Brookstone Financial, you're the only analyst who has consistently delivered exceptional results while maintaining the highest ethical standards. Any promotion you receive is well-deserved. The next morning, I met Patricia Henderson at Cafe Central, a quiet spot downtown far from our office building. I had prepared for this conversation carefully, knowing I would have only one chance to present my case effectively. Mrs. Henderson, thank you for meeting with me. I want to start by saying that what I'm about to share comes from a place of genuine concern for the company's well-being and reputation. Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious. She was a sharp woman in her early 50s, with the kind of intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I'm listening, Julia. I opened my portfolio and began walking her through the documentation. I started with Marcus's questionable expenses, moved through his pattern of taking credit for my work, and detailed his compromising of client relationships by inserting an unqualified intern into crucial business meetings. Patricia's expression grew increasingly grave as I spoke. When I showed her the client testimonials, her lips pressed into a thin line. Julia, these are very serious allegations. Do you have documentation to support everything you're telling me? Yes, ma'am. And I want to be clear. I'm not here to attack your husband personally. I'm here because I believe the company deserves better than what's been happening in our department. Then I told her about the conference room conversation I'd overheard at the Christmas party. Patricia was silent for a long moment after I finished. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Julia, I need to ask you something directly. Are you telling me that my husband is having an affair with this intern, and that he's planning to promote her as a reward for that relationship? I'm telling you what I observed and documented. I think the board should have all the information before making its decision about the regional director position. Patricia closed the portfolio and looked at me steadily. What do you want from me? I want the interview process to be fair. I want the board to evaluate candidates based on qualifications and performance, and I want what's best for Brookstone Financial Services. She stood up, shaking my hand. Julia, I appreciate your courage in bringing this to my attention. The board will definitely have all relevant information before we make our decision. As she turned to leave, she paused. Oh, and Julia, the interviews are still happening tomorrow as planned. I trust you'll be ready to present your best case for why you deserve this promotion. I smiled. Yes, ma'am. I've been preparing for this opportunity for 10 years. The morning of April 10th arrived with spring rain drumming against the office windows. The interviews were scheduled to begin at 10 a.m. in the main conference room. Bella was scheduled first, followed by me at 11 a.m., and 2 external candidates in the afternoon. I arrived at the office early, as usual, and spent the morning handling routine client calls and finalizing quarterly reports. Around 9:45, I saw Bella heading toward the conference room, looking nervous but confident in a new designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. At exactly 11 a.m., I knocked on the conference room door. Come in, Julia, Patricia Henderson's voice called. I entered to find the interview panel assembled. Patricia Henderson, board member Robert Chen, Bella's uncle, I realized with interest, board member Susan Walsh, and Marcus. The atmosphere in the room was noticeably tense. Please, have a seat, Patricia said, gesturing to the chair across from the panel. We'd like to start by having you walk us through your qualifications for this position. For the next 20 minutes, I presented my case methodically. I detailed my client relationship management, my analysis expertise, my leadership experience with junior staff, and my track record of bringing in new business. I provided specific metrics, client testimonials, and examples of innovative strategies. I had developed. Marcus sat through my presentation with increasingly visible discomfort, especially when I mentioned specific clients and projects. Julia, he interrupted during my discussion of the Hayes manufacturing account, I think it's important to remember that these accounts were developed as team efforts under my supervision. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. Marcus, could you elaborate on your specific contributions to the Hayes account development? I watched Marcus struggle to answer, realizing he had no detailed knowledge of how that relationship had actually been built. Well, naturally, as department head, I provided strategic oversight and I'm sorry to interrupt, Robert Chen said, consulting a folder in front of him. But we have a letter here from Jonathan Hayes specifically praising Julia's individual excellence and stating that he considers her his primary point of contact. Mr. Hayes also mentions that he has requested to work exclusively with Julia on his account. Marcus, do you recall any strategic oversight meetings you had regarding the Hayes account? Marcus's face was growing red. I don't micromanage every client interaction, but of course not, Susan Walsh interjected smoothly. But surely you can recall the key strategic decisions you made regarding your department's largest account? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Patricia leaned forward. Julia, can you tell us about your approach to mentoring junior staff members? Certainly. I believe in providing comprehensive training, clear expectations, and honest feedback. When Bella joined our team, for example, I spent considerable time teaching her our client management systems and analytical procedures. And how would you evaluate Bella's progress? I chose my words carefully, knowing that Robert Chen was listening as Bella's uncle. Bella is enthusiastic and eager to learn. However, she would benefit from more foundational training before taking on significant client-facing responsibilities. In my opinion, she's not yet ready for senior-level strategic work. Marcus couldn't contain himself. That's exactly the kind of rigid thinking that's holding this department back. Bella brings fresh energy and new approaches that... Marcus? Patricia's voice cut through his protest like ice. What specific new approaches has Bella introduced? Again, silence. Susan Walsh consulted her notes. We've reviewed the client feedback from meetings where both Julia and Bella were present. The responses are quite telling. Would you like us to read some of these evaluations aloud? Marcus's face had gone from red to pale. That won't be necessary. I think we should focus on future potential rather than... Actually, I think it will be very necessary, Patricia said quietly. Marcus, we need to discuss several concerns that have been brought to the board's attention regarding your management of this department. And that's when I knew Patricia had done her homework. What happened next was swift and devastating. Patricia opened a thick folder and began reading from what I recognized as my documentation, though clearly the board had done additional investigation beyond what I had provided. Marcus, we need you to explain $23,147 in questionable expense reports over the past 18 months. This includes charges for business dinners that lasted past midnight, hotel rooms in cities where we have no active clients, and registration fees for conferences that appear not to exist. Marcus stammered. These were all legitimate business expenses. I can provide additional documentation. We'd appreciate that, Robert Chen said dryly. We'd also like you to explain why you've been claiming credit for client relationship development that was actually performed by other team members. Susan Walsh took over. Marcus, we have written statements from 3 major clients specifically crediting Julia with account development and management. Yet your performance evaluations claim that you personally developed and maintained these relationships. How do you explain this discrepancy? There seems to be some misunderstanding about team leadership versus individual contributions. And then there's the matter of your recommendation for the regional director position. Patricia's voice was deadly quiet now. Marcus, can you explain to the board why you believe a 6-month intern with no financial experience is more qualified than a 10-year veteran with an exemplary track record? Marcus looked around the room desperately. Sometimes fresh perspective is more valuable than bringing in $12 million in new business? Susan Walsh asked. More valuable than maintaining a 97% client satisfaction rating? More valuable than mentoring junior staff and covering for departmental mistakes without complaint? The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Marcus, I think we need to have a private conversation. Julia, thank you for your time. We'll be making our decision by end of business today. As I stood to leave, Marcus made his final fatal mistake. Patricia, you're making a huge error here. You don't understand the complexities of departmental management. Julia is competent, I'll grant you that, but she's not executive material. She doesn't have the flexibility, the willingness to go above and beyond that this position requires. Bella understands what it takes to succeed in this business. The room went completely silent. Patricia stood up slowly. Marcus, are you suggesting that sleeping with you is a job requirement? Marcus's mouth fell open. I never said... Because that's what you just described. Flexibility. Going above and beyond. Understanding what it takes. Either you're admitting to sexual harassment and quid pro quo corruption, or you're telling us that a 22-year-old with no experience is genuinely more qualified than Julia Martin. Robert Chen's voice was ice cold. Marcus, I think you need to explain exactly what you mean by flexibility. And that's when Marcus Henderson's 15-year career at Brookstone Financial Services ended. The confrontation that followed was swift and brutal. Under pressure from 3 board members who clearly already knew more than they were letting on, Marcus finally admitted to his relationship with Bella. He tried to frame it as irrelevant to his business decisions, but when Patricia produced evidence of their affair, apparently she had hired a private investigator after our coffee meeting, his defense crumbled completely. You've been stealing credit from hardworking employees, falsifying expense reports, compromising client relationships, and using your position to coerce sexual favors from subordinates, Patricia said, her voice shaking with rage. Marcus, you're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. But Patricia wasn't done. You're also facing a complete audit of every financial decision you've made as department head. If we find evidence of embezzlement or fraud, we'll be pressing criminal charges. And Marcus? She leaned forward across the table. I'm divorcing you. My lawyer will be in touch this afternoon. Marcus tried one last desperate play. Patricia, you can't do this based on office gossip and jealous accusations. I can and I am. You see, Marcus, while you were busy mentoring your intern, I was busy protecting the company I helped build. Julia's documentation was just the beginning. We have surveillance footage of your after-hours activities in the office. We have hotel records and credit card statements. We have testimony from other female employees about your inappropriate behavior, and we have recorded conversations. She smiled coldly. You always did forget that the conference room phones have been connected to our security system since 2019. The blood drained from Marcus's face. He looked around the room desperately, his gaze finally landing on me. Julia, you don't understand what you've done. You've destroyed my career, my marriage, everything I've built. No, Marcus, I said quietly. You destroyed those things yourself. I just documented the process. Security arrived to escort him from the building. As he was led away, Patricia turned to me with a tired smile. Julia, congratulations. You're the new regional director effective immediately. Your salary adjustment will be $52,000 annually, a bit more than the original posting considering you'll be cleaning up the mess Marcus left behind. Robert Chen stood up. Julia, I owe you an apology. I had no idea what my niece had gotten involved in. Bella will be terminated today as well, and I'll be recusing myself from any personnel decisions involving family members going forward. Susan. Walsh nodded. Julia, we should have been paying closer attention to what was happening in that department. Your documentation and courage in coming forward probably saved us from a massive lawsuit and reputation disaster. As the board members filed out, Patricia lingered behind. Julia, I need you to know, I had no idea what kind of man I married. In some ways, you saved me from wasting even more years of my life with someone who had no integrity. Mrs. Henderson, I'm sorry this happened to your family. She shook her head. Don't apologize for telling the truth. And Julia, it's Patricia. We're going to be working closely together to rebuild that department, and I have a feeling this is the beginning of something much better for all of us. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks like a perfectly choreographed performance. Marcus's termination became company-wide knowledge within hours. Bella was called to Patricia's office that same afternoon and terminated for inappropriate workplace conduct and misrepresentation of qualifications. The official statement to the staff mentioned restructuring for better departmental efficiency and ethical standards. But the real fireworks were just beginning. Patricia Henderson's divorce attorney moved faster than anyone expected. By Friday of that same week, Marcus had been served with papers that included detailed financial audits and asset freeze orders. Apparently, the private investigator Patricia had hired discovered that Marcus's affair with Bella wasn't his first. There had been a pattern of inappropriate relationships with subordinates dating back years. More damaging for Marcus personally was the revelation that he had been using company credit cards for his affairs. The hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the jewelry purchases that he'd claimed were client gifts All of it had been funding his infidelity. The final blow came when the forensic accountant Patricia hired discovered that Marcus had been inflating his commission calculations by claiming CRE edit for deals he hadn't actually closed. Over 5 years, he had essentially stolen $127,000 from the company through false performance claims. Criminal charges were filed on a Tuesday morning in May: wire fraud, embezzlement, and sexual harassment. The local business journal picked up the story, running a front-page article titled, "Financial Executive Arrested for Fraud and Harassment Scheme." But here's what Marcus never understood about Patricia Henderson. She wasn't just wealthy, she was strategically brilliant. The company stock she controlled wasn't just her divorce settlement. It was her inheritance from a family that had built their fortune on knowing when and how to cut their losses. Marcus's pension was forfeit due to criminal activity. His stock options were voided. His professional licenses were suspended pending investigation. Within 6 weeks, he went from a 6-figure executive to facing federal charges with no income and no assets. Meanwhile, Bella Chen learned that her Uncle Robert was far less forgiving than she had expected. She was not only terminated from Brookstone, but found herself unable to secure references for other positions. When word spread through Chicago's tight-knit financial community about her involvement in the scandal, other companies quietly removed her from consideration for roles she'd applied for. I heard through professional networks that she eventually moved back home with her parents and took a job at a retail store in the suburbs. Her dreams of climbing the corporate ladder had died with her mentor's career. For me, the transition to regional director was smoother than anyone expected. It helped that I actually knew how to do the job I'd been promoted to, unlike the previous candidate Marcus had preferred. My first official act was to implement new client service protocols based on the relationships I'd been building for years. Within my first quarter, client satisfaction scores jumped to 99%, and we landed 2 major new accounts worth a combined $8.3 million in managed assets. Patricia and I worked closely together to rebuild the department's culture. We implemented strict ethical guidelines, transparent promotion criteria, and comprehensive harassment prevention training. Most importantly, we established a direct reporting channel to the board for any employee concerns about management behavior. The staff responded immediately. Morale improved, productivity increased, and for the first time in years, we had 0 turnover in our department. But the most satisfying moment came 6 months after Marcus's termination, during our annual performance review cycle. Patricia called me into her office, the same office where Marcus had told me I wasn't flexible enough for promotion. "Julia, I have the department performance metrics for this year," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Since you took over as regional director, our department has outperformed every other division in the company. Client retention is at an all-time high, new business acquisition has increased by 340%, and our compliance ratings are perfect." She leaned back in her chair with a smile. "The board voted unanimously last night to promote you to Vice President of Regional Operations. It comes with a $73,000 salary increase, equity shares in the company, and oversight of 4 additional departments." I looked at the promotion letter, seeing my name printed in the spot I'd been working toward for 10 years. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "The board wants to offer you Marcus's old office. Corner office, city view, the works. What do you think?" I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. "Actually, Patricia, I'd like to stay in my current office. The view is perfect from where I am." And it was. From my office window, I could see the federal courthouse where Marcus Henderson was scheduled to appear for sentencing in 3 weeks. The sentencing hearing was held on a gray November morning. I didn't attend. I had client meetings that day. And frankly, I had moved on to more important things. But Patricia kept me updated on the proceedings. Marcus Henderson was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $247,000 in restitution to Brookstone Financial Services. His professional licenses were permanently revoked, and he was banned from working in financial services for life. The judge's comments, according to Patricia, were particularly pointed. "Mr. Henderson, you held a position of trust and authority, and you abused that position to steal from your employer and exploit your subordinates. Your actions represent a fundamental betrayal of the ethical standards that govern professional conduct. Bella Chen was not charged criminally, but she did face civil liability for her role in Marcus's expense account fraud. She was ordered to repay $12,000 in fraudulent charges that had been made on her behalf. The divorce settlement was finalized that same week. Patricia kept the house, the company stock, and her dignity. Marcus kept his legal bills and his criminal record. But here's what gave me the most satisfaction. Marcus's downfall hadn't been the result of some elaborate revenge scheme or dramatic confrontation. It had been the inevitable consequence of his own choices, documented carefully and presented professionally to people who had the authority to address it. I never had to become vindictive or unprofessional. I never had to compromise my own ethical standards. I simply had to be patient, thorough, and trust that the truth would speak for itself. 2 years later, I was promoted again, this time to Senior Vice President, making me one of the highest-ranking executives at Brookstone Financial Services. My department had become the company's flagship operation, and I was frequently asked to speak at industry conferences about ethical leadership and team building. During one such conference, a young woman approached me after my presentation. She was probably in her mid-20s, professionally dressed, with the eager expression of someone just starting her career. "Ms. Martin, I wanted to thank you for your talk about maintaining integrity under pressure. I'm starting my first job at a financial services firm next month, and I was wondering, do you have any advice for someone just entering the industry?" I thought about Marcus Henderson, about Bella Chen, about the 10 years I spent watching and learning and documenting. I thought about the importance of patience, preparation, and choosing your battles wisely. "Work hard, be honest, and keep detailed records of everything you do," I told her. "Document your achievements, maintain your professional standards, and never compromise your integrity for a shortcut. The people with real power, the ones worth working for, will recognize and reward genuine competence." She nodded eagerly, taking notes on her phone. "And remember," I added, "karma doesn't work on your timeline. Sometimes justice takes years to arrive. But if you're patient and professional, and if you let people reveal who they really are through their own choices, the truth has a way of coming to light." As she walked away, I thought about how different my life might have been if I had confronted Marcus directly, if I had let anger drive my decisions, if I had tried to fight him on his terms instead of mine. But I didn't have to wonder about that alternate timeline. I was exactly where I belonged, doing work I loved, with the respect of colleagues and clients who valued competence and integrity over politics and manipulation. These days, I barely think about Marcus Henderson at all. Occasionally, I'll see Patricia at board meetings or company functions, and we'll exchange knowing smiles. She remarried last year, a literature professor from Northwestern who treats her with genuine respect and admiration. She seems happy in a way I never saw during her marriage to Marcus. My office overlooks Lake Michigan now, and on clear days I can see for miles. Sometimes I think about young professionals who might be facing situations like the one I endured, working for bosses who mistake their authority for wisdom, who confuse exploitation with leadership, who think integrity is a weakness rather than a strength. To them, I would say this: document everything. Be patient. Trust in your own competence. And remember that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building the career and life you deserve while letting other people's poor choices speak for themselves. Marcus Henderson thought he could manipulate his way to success indefinitely. He thought his position protected him from consequences and that his charm could overcome his lack of substance. He underestimated the women around him, his wife, his employees, and the board members who actually ran the company he thought he controlled. Most of all, he underestimated the power of simple, documented truth. I never needed to destroy Marcus Henderson. I just needed to step aside and let him destroy himself, while making sure the right people had all the information they needed to make good decisions. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. The promotion I earned, the career I built, and the respect I command, none of it came from tearing someone else down. It came from 10 years of competence, integrity, and patience, combined with the wisdom to know that sometimes the best strategy is simply to tell the truth at the right time to the right people. Marcus Henderson gave his promotion to someone he thought was more flexible, But flexibility without competence is just weakness in disguise. And in a world where results matter more than relationships, competence always wins in the end. Last month, I received an unexpected piece of mail at the office. It was a handwritten letter from Marcus Henderson, postmarked from the Federal Correctional Institution where he's serving his sentence. The letter was 2 pages long, filled with justifications, excuses, and attempts at self-redemption. He claimed that he had been caught up in a moment of poor judgment, and that he never meant for things to go as far as they did. He suggested that if I could find it in my heart to forgive him, perhaps we could let bygones be bygones when he was released. The final paragraph asked if I might be willing to provide a character reference for his early parole hearing. I read buying. The letter twice then did something that felt perfectly appropriate. I filed it away in my records just as I had filed away everything else related to Marcus Henderson. I didn't respond. Some conversations are over, some chapters are closed, and some people have said everything they're ever going to have the opportunity to say. Marcus Henderson had 37 months in prison to think about flexibility, and I had the rest of my career to demonstrate what real leadership looks like. I think we both got exactly what we deserved.